The rain hadn't stopped all afternoon. It wasn't the hard, cathartic kind that cleaned the streets. It was the thin, steady drizzle that made the city feel suspended in time. Phil Bennett sat in his old sedan, windshield wipers squealing against the glass, staring up at the building that would be his new home. 6 stories of weathered red brick loomed against the gray skyline. The windows were narrow, many half fogged from the inside. The faded letters above the door read, Crawley Arms Apartments, the S hanging at an odd angle as if trying to fall free. Phil took a deep breath and turned off the car. Fresh start, he said to no one. His voice sounded thin in the confined space. He opened the door, grabbed a box of books from the passenger seat, and jogged through the drizzle to the building's entrance. The lobby was a narrow space that smelled faintly of bleach and something older, mildew maybe, or damp wood. A single bulb buzzed above the mailboxes. At the front desk stood a man in his late 50s, thick glasses, sweater vest, thinning gray hair combed neatly back. He smiled with the kind of politeness that felt rehearsed. Mr. Bennett, right? I'm Crawley. Welcome to the Arms. Phil nodded, shaking his hand. Thanks. Sorry I'm a little late. Traffic from the West End was not a problem at all, Crawley interrupted with that same practiced warmth. Long drive in the rain isn't good for anyone's nerves. You'll be in 4B, fourth floor, into the hall on the left. Phil set his box down and took the keys. Appreciate it. Is there anything I should know about the place? Crawley hesitated. His eyes flicked upward toward the ceiling, as though listening. Let's see. Heat can be temperamental, but it works. The elevator's a bit slow. Use the stairs if you can. Oh, and one more thing. He lowered his voice slightly. Laundry's in the basement. Only during the day, please. Wiring's old. Lights flicker at night, and I don't want anyone tripping or getting hurt. Got it, Phil said, smiling faintly. Daytime laundry only. Crawley's lips pressed into a thin line. Good man. Phil chalked the odd warning up to old building quirks. He thanked him, retrieved the rest of his boxes, and trudged up the stairs. The apartment itself was small but livable. Hardwood floors with scuffs, a window overlooking a narrow alley, radiator humming faintly, a single bedroom, a modest kitchen. He'd lived in worse. He unpacked in silence, filling the empty space with the distant hum of city life. Somewhere far below, a train passed. As he set his late wife Mara's photo on the nightstand, the familiar ache returned. Her smile, that half smile she always made when he told a bad joke, caught him in the chest. He whispered, I'm trying, okay? And turned the frame face down. The first neighbor he met came the next morning. He was locking his door when he heard a soft voice behind him. You must be the new tenant. He turned to see a small silver-haired woman standing in her doorway, wrapped in a knitted cardigan the color of faded lavender. Her face was a map of lines, but her eyes were bright and kind. I'm Mrs. Doherty. Been here longer than anyone else, I suppose. Phil Bennett, he said, smiling. Nice to meet you. She returned the smile and nodded approvingly. Always good to have someone new around. These halls get awful quiet sometimes. I don't mind quiet, he said. Oh, I used to say that too. She chuckled softly. Until I realized quiet can listen back. Phil blinked. Sorry. She waved a wrinkled hand dismissively. Just an old woman talking nonsense. Don't mind me. But as she turned, Phil noticed the necklace resting just above her sweater, a small brass triangle pendant, each point marked with a tiny engraved dot. He caught the hallway light gleaming faintly. That's a nice piece, he said. Family heirloom? Mrs. Doherty looked down at it fondly, thumb brushing the pendant. Oh, this old thing? My husband gave it to me years ago. Helps me feel safe, you know. From what? He asked lightly. Her smile lingered, but her eyes flicked toward the end of the hall. Sometimes this building remembers too much, and when it does, doors knock that shouldn't. Phil let out a quiet laugh, unsure if she was joking. I'll keep that in mind. You do that, dear, she smiled again. warm as ever. If you ever hear knocking after midnight, best not answer. Old buildings have their moods. And with that, she retreated into her apartment, humming softly to herself. Days passed without incident. Phil started to fall into a rhythm: coffee, job applications, walks to the nearby park. The apartment creaked and groaned at night, but he told himself it was just pipes and old wood settling. By the end of the week, he had a job interview scheduled at a downtown law firm. He ironed his shirt, cleaned his shoes, and stacked his laundry basket near the door. He remembered Crawley's warning about the basement, but it was late, and he needed clean clothes. He hesitated, glancing towards the window. Rain again, tapping softly against the glass. 5 minutes, he told himself, in and out. The hallway was dim. Most of the lights along the stairwell flickered. The air grew colder as he descended. The basement door groaned open. A long concrete corridor stretched before him, pipes running overhead, walls sweating moisture. At the far end, a single light bulb swayed slightly, its chain clicking softly with each motion. The laundry room was small: 2 washers, 2 dryers, a rusted folding table. He loaded his clothes, coins clinking in the slot, the rhythmic churn of water filling the silence. For a moment, everything was normal. Then a faint rustle. He froze, glancing toward the doorway. Nothing, just the hum of the machines. He exhaled slowly. Old pipes, he muttered. But the sound came again, closer this time, like soft fabric dragging along concrete. He turned off the washer. The silence was sudden and heavy. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the door, something shuffled. Hello? No answer. Phil stepped forward, squinting into the hallway. The bulb swayed again, but now it was moving faster, like it had been touched. That was enough. He grabbed his basket, wet clothes and all, and started up the stairs 2 at a time. Behind him came a sound that didn't belong. Not footsteps exactly, but the rhythm of something climbing after him. He reached the top landing and shoved the door open, heart pounding. As he turned to slam it shut, he caught, just for a split second, the image of a withered gray hand curling around the banister, skin stretched tight over bone. He slammed the door, twisted the lock, and stumbled back, chest heaving. Silence. Only his own breath and the steady tick of the hallway clock. After a long minute, he laughed shakily to himself. Jesus, Phil. Get a grip. But when he finally went back to his apartment, dripping laundry in his arms, he could have sworn, just for a moment, that Mrs. Doherty's door across the hall was open an inch wider than before. Phil woke to sunlight cutting across his face. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. The radiator hissed beside him. The faint smell of detergent lingered in the air. And then he remembered the night before. The hand. He sat up abruptly, heart thudding. The apartment was silent except for the slow tick of the clock on the kitchen wall. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled. Dream, he muttered. Had to be. But when he walked to the door, the laundry basket still sat by the entrance. Damp clothes crumpled inside, a small puddle forming beneath it. He hadn't imagined that part. Phil laughed under his breath, more to break the silence than anything. Guess I'm doing laundry during the day next time. He showered, dressed, and made coffee. By the time he buttoned his shirt for the interview, the memory had dulled, tucked neatly into the corner of his mind, reserved for things he refused to think too hard about. The law firm's office was on the 14th floor of a downtown tower, all glass, chrome, and the faint smell of toner. The interview went well. The partners liked his composure, his background, and his precision. They said they'd be in touch soon. By the time Phil got back to the apartment, the sun was setting. He passed Mrs. Doherty in the hallway. She was watering a potted fern by her door. Well, don't you look sharp, she said, smiling. Job interview, he said. Think it went all right. I'm sure it did, dear. You have a good energy about you. Phil chuckled. Thanks. Hopefully the building doesn't ruin it. Laundry rooms down there are nightmare fuel. Mrs. Doherty's watering can paused mid-pour. You went down there at night? Phil hesitated. Yeah, I needed a clean shirt. Her face fell slightly, the light in her eyes dimming. "Oh, Phil, you mustn't do that." "Mr. Crawley mentioned electrical issues," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. Mrs. Doherty shook her head. "No, it's not the wiring." He frowned. "Then what?" She smiled faintly as if realizing she'd said too much. "Never mind, dear. Just don't go down there again after dark. Promise me." "Sure," he said. "You've got my word." She seemed satisfied with that and returned to her watering. As Phil unlocked his door, she added softly, "And if you hear anyone knocking late, don't open the door. It's never who you think." Phil turned to ask what she meant, but she'd already gone inside. That night, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The apartment made its usual symphony of old building noises, the groan of pipes, the faint scuttle of something in the walls. He dozed off eventually, and for the first time since the move, he dreamed. He was in the basement again, standing in ankle-deep water. The single bulb above him flickered wildly, casting light that didn't reach the corners. He could hear whispering, dozens of voices just beneath the surface of the water, murmuring in tones that rose and fell like breath. Something brushed his ankle. He looked down and a pale hand broke the surface, fingers curling around his leg. Phil woke with a gasp. His sheets were damp with sweat, his heart slamming against his ribs. The clock read 3:12 a.m. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Bad dream," he whispered. Then came the sound. Tap, tap, tap. A knock, faint but distinct, from somewhere near the front door. He froze, every muscle going still. 3 knocks, then silence. His mind immediately went to Mrs. Doherty's words. "If you hear knocking late, don't open the door." Phil exhaled, forcing himself to move. He stood, crossed the creaking floorboards, and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The faint hum of the exit sign flickered red across the far wall. He stood there another moment, then locked the deadbolt, turned away, and muttered, "Old pipes. Someone walking by. That's it." He made it back to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. He left the lamp on this time. 2 days later, he got the call. He'd landed the job. The firm wanted him to start Monday. Phil celebrated with takeout and a cheap bottle of wine. He felt almost human again. By the time he went to bed, he'd convinced himself that the noises, the dream, even the knock, all stress, grief, and exhaustion playing tricks on him, at least until the scratching started. It began softly, like nails against wood. He was sitting at the table, reading, when he heard it, coming from somewhere behind the wall. Scritch, scritch, scritch. He put the book down. "Mice," he said out loud. "Fantastic." The sound stopped, then resumed, longer, deeper this time, dragging upward along the wall. He pressed his ear to the plaster. The noise moved with him, like it was following his attention. He grabbed a flashlight and checked along the baseboards, behind the radiator, inside the closet. Nothing. When he returned to his chair, the sound began again. This time, it ended with a sharp thud, like something hitting from the other side. Phil jumped. "All right, that's enough," he muttered. He rapped his knuckles against the wall. "Cut it out." Silence. Then, so faint he almost missed it, a whisper. It came from inside the wall. He couldn't make out words, just the texture of speech, like breath moving through hollow space. Phil backed away, pulse hammering. A knock came at his door, loud, sudden, normal. He nearly jumped out of his skin. When he opened it, Mrs. Doherty was standing there, clutching her necklace. "Bill," she said softly, "are you all right?" He nodded, exhaling in relief. Yeah, yeah, I just thought I heard something in the walls." Her eyes flicked toward his apartment's interior, then back to him. "If you did, best to ignore it." "Kind of hard to ignore something scratching your drywall," he said, half laughing. She didn't smile. "They notice when you notice them." He frowned. "Mrs. Doherty, what does that mean?" She hesitated, then patted his arm. "You're a nice young man, Mr. Bennett. Don't let this place change that. Promise me." And before he could answer, she turned and shuffled back down the hall. Phil watched her door close, the faint glint of the brass triangle pendant disappearing behind it. That night, he left his television on for noise. The scratching didn't return, but just before sleep took him, he thought he heard something faint beneath the static, a low, rhythmic breathing that wasn't his. By Monday morning, Phil's life had found a rhythm again. He rose early, took the metro downtown, and spent his first day at the law firm buried in paperwork and polite small talk. Felt good, almost normal. The office lights were bright, the coffee endless, and the clatter of keyboards drowned out the quiet that had been gnawing at him in the apartment. When he left that evening, the city was glowing. Traffic lights, neon, the hum of life. He told himself that the strange things in the building were just silence, playing tricks on grief. Mrs. Doherty greeted him as soon as he stepped off the elevator that night. She was standing in the hall outside her door, watering can in hand, cardigan buttoned wrong, eyes shining with relief. "There you are." I was beginning to worry. "Just the first day," he said with a tired smile. "Survived it." "Good. Work keeps the mind busy, helps you forget the noises." Phil froze for half a second and then forced a chuckle. "You mean the scratching?" She tilted her head. "Oh, you heard them then." He frowned. "It's probably rats. Crawley should call an exterminator." Mrs. Dougherty looked at him the way a mother looks at a child who doesn't yet understand the rules of the world. "No, dear. Not rats. The building just leaks sometimes, between places." Phil shifted the mail in his hands, trying to laugh it off. "You've got quite an imagination." "Yes," she said, almost wistfully. "That's how I've survived here so long." Then softer, "You should wear something blessed. Silver helps." He nodded politely and retreated to his apartment. Behind him, her door clicked shut, and the faint sound of humming floated through the hall. The next few nights passed in uneasy quiet. The scratching came and went. Sometimes when he turned off the lights, he could swear he heard a faint wet drip somewhere near the walls, like condensation, but slower. By Thursday, exhaustion had sunk into him. He fell asleep fully dressed, the lamp still on. He dreamed of whispering again, hundreds of voices in a tunnel, overlapping. One voice rose above the rest, a woman's pleading, "Don't let them in." He woke to a sharp knock, 3:07 a.m. 3 quick raps on the door, then silence. He didn't move. The air felt heavy, electric. Then another sound. Shuffling, a soft thump, like something brushing the door from the other side. Phil sat up, heart pounding, and whispered to himself, "Don't open it, don't open it." After a long minute, the noises stopped. In the morning, there were faint smears of dust on the floorboards near the door, as if someone had dragged their fingers there. That afternoon, he saw Mrs. Doherty again. She looked worse, skin gray, hands trembling, the brass pendant dull against her chest. "Mrs. Doherty, are you all right?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. Her eyes were fixed on him, unfocused. Then she whispered, voice shaking, "They saw you, Mr. Bennett." Phil blinked. "Who?" "You went down there," she said, each word trembling. "They saw you in the dark. They remember faces." "Mrs. Doherty, you're not making sense." She took a step toward him, clutching her necklace. "You need to leave this place. Leave before they learn your name." Phil reached out to steady her, but she jerked violently, eyes rolling back. The pendant slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. A thin crack split across its surface. "Mrs. Doherty!" She collapsed, convulsing. Phil knelt beside her, shouting for help. Her lips moved, forming sounds that weren't words. A dry rasp, guttural and low. Then she went still. The hallway filled with footsteps, voices, panic. Someone called 911. Phil sat beside her body, staring at the broken pendant on the floor. The 3 dots seemed deeper now, as if hollowed out. The police came and went. "Stroke," they said, "nothing suspicious." Crawley hovered nearby, wringing his hands. Poor woman. Heart couldn't take it. She'd been here longer than anyone. Phil nodded numbly, still seeing the crack across the pendant in his mind. When the paramedics wheeled her away, Crawley pocketed the necklace without a word. That night, the building felt emptier. The humming of the radiator seemed too loud, the shadows in the hallway too thick. Phil tried to work on case files from the firm, but concentration slipped away. His eyes kept darting to the door. Around midnight, the scratching returned, harder this time. Long, dragging strokes that scraped the wood grain. He stared at the door until the sound stopped, then approached slowly. The hallway beyond was dark. The bulb outside his apartment flickered weakly. He started to close the door again and froze. On the wood, at chest level, were fresh marks. 5 parallel scratches, deep enough to gouge the paint, streaked with something dark and wet. Blood. Phil stumbled back, heart racing. He locked the deadbolt, shoved a chair under the handle, and stood there shaking. From somewhere inside the apartment, faint but unmistakable, came a whisper. Phil. He spun, flashlight sweeping across the room. Empty. Who's there? Nothing. He stood frozen for nearly an hour before exhaustion finally broke through fear. He collapsed into bed, lights still on, and didn't wake until dawn. The next morning, he went straight to the building's office. Crawley was behind the desk reading a newspaper. Morning, Mr. Bennett, he said without looking up. Phil slammed his palm on the counter. Someone's bleeding in the hallway. There are scratches on my door. Crawley blinked slowly, folding his paper. Now. Let's not overreact. Old buildings creak. Paint chips. People imagine things when they're tired. I didn't imagine blood. Crawley smiled, patient and calm. And yet, when I check, I'm sure I'll find nothing. The janitor cleaned that floor not 2 hours ago. Phil's anger faltered. What are you talking about? Crawley gestured toward the hall. Go on. Have a look. Phil turned, walked back, and felt his stomach twist. The scratches were gone, the door pristine, not even a scuff. When he turned back, Crawley was already closing the office door. That night, the building seemed to breathe around him. He sat on the couch with a drink, staring at the blank television screen. His reflection in the dark glass looked wrong, a fraction slower, eyes slightly off center. He blinked, and it was fine again. Stress, he whispered. That's all. But he couldn't stop thinking about the pendant, the way it cracked when Mrs. Doggerty fell. Later, scrolling through his phone, he typed the only thing he could remember. Triangle symbol, 3 dots, necklace, meaning. Dozens of results appeared. Old occult diagrams, fragments of half-translated Latin, blogs filled with grainy photos. One symbol looked almost identical. Triquetra of invocation, the caption read, used to open communication between realms. A gateway sigil. Phil stared at the screen. Communication between realms, he murmured. So she was carrying something that would open a gateway? How would that keep her safe? He saved the image. Outside, the wind picked up, moaning faintly through the cracks in the window frame. In the reflection on the glass, just behind his shoulder, a shape moved. Too tall, too thin. He spun around, nothing there. But when he looked back at the window, the reflection lingered a heartbeat longer than it should have, and smiled. It was nearly 2 a.m. when it began again. Phil had left the lamp on, fallen asleep on the couch, case files scattered around him. A faint tick, tick, tick woke him, and the sound of something dripping. He sat up. The clock on the wall had stopped at 3:07. A shape moved past the kitchen doorway. Who's there? His voice cracked. No answer. Only the slow creak of the floorboards, like someone shifting their weight just out of sight. Phil grabbed the flashlight from the counter, its beam cutting a narrow line through the darkness. The air felt thick, heavy with dust and a strange metallic smell, like rust or old pennies. He swung the light toward the kitchen. Empty. He took a step forward. and heard it, a whisper, soft right next to his ear. "We saw you." Phil spun, beam shaking across the walls. "Stop it, stop." The whispering multiplied, a chorus surrounding him. He stumbled back into the living room, heart slamming. "You opened it. You called us. We remember your face." He dropped the flashlight, its beam rolling across the floor. For half a second, it caught something in its path, a set of bare feet, pale and wronged, standing just behind his armchair. When he blinked, they were gone. The next morning, Phil showed up at a church 2 blocks away. He hadn't slept. His hands trembled as he explained what was happening, as best he could without sounding insane. The priest, Father Mendez, listened silently, brow furrowed. "I don't know what's in that building," Phil said, "but something's there. I just, I need it gone." Mendez hesitated, then said softly, "I can come by. Sometimes there are spirits that linger. We'll bless the home." For the first time in days, Phil felt relief. That afternoon, Father Mendez followed him to the apartment, but as they crossed the property line, the priest stopped dead. His eyes widened, face draining of color. "What is it?" Phil asked. Mendez's voice came out a whisper. "This place. It's wrong. There's something bound here. Something old." Phil tried to laugh it off, though it came out shaky. "You sound like her. Mrs. Doherty." The priest took one step forward and then froze, staring up at the building's facade. "She was wearing a symbol, wasn't she?" Phil blinked. "Yeah, a triangle pendant with dots. Why?" "That's not protection," Mendez said, voice trembling. "That's invocation. Whoever marked this building didn't seal it. They invited something through." Before Phil could respond, Mendez turned pale as parchment and stumbled backward. "I can't go in there," he gasped. "God help you if you already have." He left without another word. Phil spent the rest of the night hunched over his laptop. His apartment was freezing, his breath faint in the air. He scrolled through arcane websites, scanned PDFs, forums, anything. He found one old site hosted on a near-dead URL, occultarchitecture.net. The page showed a black and white photograph of a triangular sigil. Beneath it, Latin text, Adaperiat Ianuum inter vivos et mortuos. Let the door between the living and the dead be opened. The description below claimed that certain buildings in early 20th century St. Louis had been constructed by a small group of architectural occultists. They embedded symbols into the design itself, thresholds meant to blur the veil between worlds. Phil scrolled faster, heart racing. There was even a list of supposed buildings, one of which matched his address. The article said the symbols with dots at each point were completion marks. They didn't protect. They finished the ritual. He leaned back, trembling. So Mrs. Doherty was protecting us by keeping hers whole. He opened a notepad and began sketching the design, triangle, 3 dots, muttering to himself, "If I copy it, maybe I can reverse it. Maybe if I just..." He drew it on the wall, over the doorframe, then on the windows. The lines were uneven, frantic. Soon the walls were covered, hundreds of triangles, dots hastily filled in with a marker that squeaked with every stroke. At 3:07 a.m., the walls began to move. The air thickened, pressing down on his chest. The lines he'd drawn started to bleed, the ink turning dark red, oozing downward like veins. The whispers came again, clearer this time. "You've finished it for us. Now we can come through." Phil stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. Shadows rippled across the room, forming shapes. Tall, thin, human only in outline. They crawled across the ceiling, their movements jerky and unnatural, like film running backward. One whispered directly into his ear, "Sleep now. We'll show you the rest." Phil screamed and threw the lamp. Glass shattered, sparks fizzled, darkness swallowed the room. He ran for the door. The knob burned his hand, hot like iron. From the hallway came a rhythmic knocking. 3 times. Pause. Then 3 again. He backed away, tears streaking his face. Please stop. You opened it. A voice hissed from the dark. You called us. The floorboards groaned. Shapes gathered at the edge of the light. Something laughed. A sound so human it made him sick. Then the laughter turned into a chorus of whispering voices, repeating the same phrase in Latin. Adaperiat ianuam. Adaperiat ianuam. Adaperiat ianuam. He pressed his palms to his ears and screamed. When dawn came, Phil was still sitting on the floor, eyes wide, staring at the wall. The ink symbols were gone. Only faint reddish stains remained, like the shadows of something that had burned through. He didn't go to work that day. He didn't leave the apartment. Instead, he sat at his desk, drinking straight from a bottle, whispering to himself, Protection symbol. I just need the protection one. He searched again, but this time, every image he found of the triangle was the same. 3 dots, invocation, gateway. No protection. He realized then that he had been tricked, that whatever had seen him had guided him to the wrong mark all along. When the sun set that evening, the shadows returned. They didn't whisper this time. They breathed. Phil tried to pray. The words came out slurred, broken. The last thing he remembered before blacking out was seeing a hand, gray, brittle, long-fingered, slide out from the wall beside him. It touched his shoulder, and he felt something cold and wet seep through his skin, crawling toward his heart. Then everything went silent. Phil didn't sleep for 3 days. The apartment smelled like burnt dust and metal. Every surface was cold to the touch. Sometimes he'd catch movement reflected in the blank TV, tall shapes standing behind him that vanished when he turned. He'd stopped going to work. The law firm left 2 voicemails. He didn't answer. His world had shrunk to those 4 walls and the things that whispered inside them. It was during one of his sleepless spirals that he found the second symbol. He'd been scanning through pages of old scanned manuscripts, fingers trembling, eyes bloodshot, and then, buried in a discussion thread on an occult forum, he saw it. A triangle, 3 dots, but with the points extended outward, like rays or blades. The caption beneath it read, Countermark, the denial of passage, used to sever open gates. Phil felt his pulse quicken. That's it, he whispered. That's how I stop them. He copied the image down carefully, tracing every line with a pen until his hand cramped. He stared at it until dawn, the shadows retreating from the edges of the room. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope. That night, armed with a permanent marker and shaking hands, he began his work. He drew the extended point triangle over every old symbol on his walls, over the door, the windows, the floorboards. His breath came in ragged bursts as he worked. Cancel the mark, he muttered to himself. Close it, close it, close it. Ink bled through his fingers. The apartment reeked of marker fumes and sweat. By the time he finished, it was almost 3 a.m. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the new sigils, dozens of them, black and sharp against the peeling wallpaper. For the first time in a long while, the apartment was silent. Phil let out a shaky laugh. It's over, he whispered. You're not getting through. I fixed it. He poured himself a drink, slumped onto the couch, and closed his eyes. But then, a sound. Tick. He opened his eyes. The clock read 3:07 again. He frowned, scanning the walls. Everything was covered, wasn't it? He grabbed the flashlight, sweeping it across the apartment. And then he saw it, in the corner, behind the bookshelf. He'd moved back earlier. One triangle missing the extended points. Just a plain, old version. The invocation mark. He froze. The beam flickered. The air thickened. The symbol on the wall began to bleed, the ink liquefying and running downward like oil. Then slowly it began to sink into the wall, the plaster rippling, as if something was pressing from the other side. Phil stumbled backward, tripping over the table. No, no, no! I finished them all! The wall breathed. A low hum filled the room. building into a deep vibration that made his teeth ache. From the center of that last unfinished symbol, a hairline crack appeared and began to spread outward, spider webbing across the wall. Behind it, a light pulsed, not white or yellow, but a sickly, shifting gray that hurt to look at. The hum turned into a voice, not one, but many. You called us. You left the door open. Now we come through. The wall split open like torn flesh. A hand emerged, gray, skeletal, skin stretched tight. Then another. Phil screamed and stumbled toward the hallway, but the door slammed shut before he reached it. Footsteps thundered from the ceiling above, impossibly fast, circling. The lights flickered violently. You forgot one. One is all it takes. He turned, pressing himself into the corner, as 6 figures dragged themselves through the crack in the wall. They were shadow and bone, faces half formed, mouths gaping silently as whispers poured out of them like steam. Phil's body went cold. His voice broke into sobs. Please, I didn't mean to. The tallest figure stepped forward, its face inches from his. Where eyes should have been were only 2 deep black pits that reflected faint light. It opened its mouth and spoke in that layered, echoing tone, non clausisti portum. You did not close the door. The figures surrounded him, chanting in the same language, faster and louder. Adaperiat ianuum inter vivos et mortuos. Adaperiat ianuum inter vivos et mortuos. Phil clamped his hands over his ears, screaming, but the sound filled his head from inside. He stumbled, fell backward onto the bed, clawing at his face. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the tallest shadow leaning over him, its mouth stretching wide, impossibly wide. And then darkness swallowed everything. The police couldn't make sense of it. Neighbors had reported a scream like metal tearing around 3 in the morning, followed by silence. When they arrived, they found the apartment door splintered and the room inside in chaos. Blood spattered the walls in triangular patterns, but no body. The only thing left intact was the wall in the far corner, where a single unfinished triangle had been drawn in dried black ink. The file labeled it a missing person case, but sometimes people walking past the building after midnight swear they see a figure in the window of Phil Bennett's old apartment. Tall, gray, motionless, and if you listen closely, they say you can still hear scratching from inside.